Welcome to Novara Live. Coming up tonight, Greater Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham has been confirmed as the Labour candidate in the Makerfield by-election, and he's allegedly promised Josh Simons a place in Downing Street as reward for standing aside. We speak to Commonwealth's Matt Lawrence about what defines Manchesterism. We hear that word a lot right now. What does it even mean? And HS2 has been delayed yet again. Is it time to call China? I'm Mariana Bastani, and I'm joined tonight by Michael Walker. Michael, how are we?
Very well. Very wide-ranging show. I've been enjoying researching the development of Manchester over the past 30 years. Looking forward to talking about it.
Manchesterism. Going to be very fun. Lots of wide things, but not too much. Stick with us for the next hour and a bit. Before we start the show tonight, we have some remarkable news to share with all of you. Last week, we launched a fundraiser to get 2,000 new regular supporters backing our work. And we're absolutely blown away that within just a week, 2,700 of you have signed up. Actually, slightly more than that even. You really did show up, so thank you. As you've heard us say a lot ahead of the next general election, is a crucial time for us to grow and expand our coverage here at Novara Media. We're moving into a new studio in a few months and essentially launching Novara 3.0. As my colleagues here, including Alex, have put it, that will allow us to triple our impact. It's going to be a very big jump. And the more of you we have backing our work here at Novara Media, the bigger we can get, the better our reporting can be. So that's why we're trying to get to 3,000 new regular supporters by the end of the week. Michael, we really did exceed expectations. I'd love it if some of you guys watching tonight could join those 2,700 people who freshly joined us over the last week. It can be anything from £1 a month. Just head to novara.media/support to sign up. The link is in the description below. Michael, why should people support Novara Media and our work, apart from watching your lovely face 4 days a week right now? Also hosting 3 days.
First of all, on the most basic level, everyone's spirits are very good in Novara Towers at the moment because this wave of support, it's very, very gratifying. Does mean we can be much more confident going into the year ahead, that we can continue to expand our operations. I really want to just keep developing this show. Developing all our shows, of course, but obviously I focus on this one. And I do think that the more resources we have, the more original reporting we can do, and the more we can break out of the news cycle, the more we can sort of intervene in the news cycle. As I keep saying, I'm quite excited that now we've got a bunch of Green councillors and potentially a more open-minded Prime Minister, that we can intervene more in policy debates than we have in recent times.
So presumptuous. You seem to be thinking that Andy Burnham could be our next Prime Minister.
I think he could be. I
Decent
think he
chance,
could be, Aaron.
right?
You heard it here first. It's possible Andy Burnham will be our next Prime Minister.
We'll, of course, be talking about that tonight to some extent. To remind you, if you want to join those almost 3,000 people, soon to be 3,000 people, supporting our work here at Novara Media, helping us build a new media for a different politics, go to novaramedia.com/support, whether it's our articles, social media content, my video reports in places like Birmingham or Manchester or South Wales. Do your own research. Michael's gorgeous face 3 days a week hosting the show. All our other podcasts. So much to read, watch, and listen to here at Novara Media. £1 a month. £1 a month. I give that to the RSPB to save, some endangered heron. You can do the same to push politics in a better direction. Greater Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham has today been confirmed by Labour's National Executive Committee as the party's candidate in the forthcoming Makerfield by-election. That is due to be held next month. Responding to the news, Burnham posted this: "I am proud and humbled to have been selected as Labour's candidate for Makerfield. These proud working class communities represent the very best values of our country, and they deserve so much better. It would be my honour to work with them every day if elected as their MP to achieve that. Many people here feel Westminster isn't working for them, and they're right. I'm standing to change that and get the voice of these communities heard loud and clear." Andy Burnham's selection is hardly a surprise, especially given reports that his was the only name on the shortlist. And with current polling showing he's pretty much the only Labour figure who could have any chance of winning the seat, the NEC appears to have acted rationally for once. Of course, Makerfield, if he wins it, is just one step in Mr. Burnham's path to number 10. Fortunately for him, it seems that Labour members are pretty keen on the idea. New polling from YouGov shows that in a head-to-head leadership contest between current Prime Minister Keir Starmer and Andy Burnham, nearly 60% of Labour members would vote for Burnham. Just a little over a third would plump for the present Prime Minister Keir Starmer. But what if there are other contenders for the job? The polling is pretty stark here too. Asked to rank contenders, Burnham takes almost half the first choice votes, with Starmer taking a third. Other figures, including Angela Rayner, Wes Streeting and Ed Miliband, just don't really compete, although Rayner, it should be said, is the favourite for second choice ballots. If Burnham wasn't standing, she would probably be the one to go against Starmer. Streeting, who's made his intention to run very clear, is the second favourite among last choice votes, trumped only by the complete unknown, Al Cairns. Michael, if it does go to a Starmer-Burnham runoff, it seems almost certain that Burnham will win. But everything that we're hearing from the PM at the moment indicates he will contest it. He's not just going to go meekly onto the backbenches.
I think that if Andy Burnham wins the by-election, there won't be a contest. I think the reason why people are still saying there is a contest because they want to say, Burnham has lost, I've always said I would stand, and now they have a chance. So I think if he wins, everyone else is dropping out. If he loses, it's going to become a sort of Starmer versus Streeting versus Ed Miliband or Angela Rayner kind of contest. Now, this YouGov poll actually was really quite striking. So in the head-to-heads, I was sort of saying on a previous show that in YouGov polling from last September, actually Streeting looked competitive against some people. So he looked competitive against Miliband, for example. Not anymore. So Burnham versus Streeting, 80% for Burnham, 10% for Streeting. Rayner versus Streeting, 70% for Rayner, 19% for Streeting. Starmer versus Streeting, 65% for Starmer, 15% for Streeting. And Miliband versus Streeting, Miliband wins 58 to 28%. So whoever he stands against, if we're to believe this polling, which is absolutely aligned with the Survation Labour List polling, Streeting has no chance. The explanation here, 60% of Labour members have an unfavourable view of Wes Streeting. Now, one would hope, if we take it as a given that the reason Wes Streeting was so proactively talking about the EU on the weekend is he wants to throw this contest for Andy Burnham and then mobilise Labour members on an issue of rejoining, let's just hope he gives up. Right? There is no chance of this man becoming Labour leader in the next 5 years. So maybe he should just start playing for the team. Might be an option. The other thing that was surprising here, well, I said, it wasn't surprising that Streeting's unpopular, but the extent of it did surprise me. The other thing that surprised me is that it is not as bad for Starmer among Labour members as I would have thought. So, of course, I've just said he would beat Streeting 65 to 15%. So that means that, if Burnham loses this, Streeting's going to be unsure whether he should challenge Starmer, even if no one else stands. But he also beats, this surprised me, Miliband, 58 to 38%. Keir Starmer beats Ed Miliband by that. I wouldn't have expected that. And Starmer versus Rayner is too close to call. And the reason why here, so what the people polled by YouGov, I think it was 700 people or so, 80% of Labour members think Starmer has done a good job in Parliament. So they think he's done a good job. They do, though, think he will struggle to win another election as Prime Minister. So the general view amongst Labour members seems to be he's doing a decent job, but unfortunately, the public don't like him, so we want to replace him with someone more popular with the electorate. But it seems like they basically think he's been hard done by.
I find that so hard to believe after the local elections because you speak to Labour councillors, even the ones who managed to keep their wards in those elections this month, and they say, look, it was all Keir Starmer. And it's interesting, isn't it? If Burnham doesn't win this by-election, everything you've just said there, and I agree with it, and everything we see from this data, it would appear to indicate that there may be another leadership contest afterwards, but Keir Starmer would probably win it. I mean, that's a really strange scenario, right? Burnham doesn't win, Starmer limps on. We do have another leadership contest, maybe after next year's local elections. I mean, that seems implausible right now, but it can really get a lot worse for Labour, can't it?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think if he loses, it's a disaster. Like, Reform are going to be absolutely licking their lips if Andy Burnham loses his by-election, as I've been saying for the whole past week. If people are saying, why is Michael so positive about Andy Burnham at the moment? It's because the alternative is terrible. Also,
why is it terrible?
Why is it terrible?
For someone who's watching and saying, why is Michael glazing the Labour Party? He's normally so impartial and judicious. Why is it terrible?
So there are two options really at the next general election, which is Reform are the largest party or Labour are the largest party. I do not think, some people watching might disagree, but I do not think the Greens are even positioning themselves as a party that can win a majority in the UK as it is currently constituted. I don't think they're making an effort at all really to appeal to socially conservative voters, which is fine. That's their choice. So from my perspective, and this is an opinion, there is either going to be the Labour Party or Reform as the largest party in the next general election. If Andy Burnham isn't in there and it's Keir Starmer, Reform will be the largest party. If Miliband or Rayner or someone takes over, maybe it'll be up in the air. However, the fact that they would have been defeated in this by-election, everyone is just going to be miserable and depressed. And the whole momentum in British politics is going to be, we're just waiting for a Reform majority. So potentially Andy Burnham losing this contest would be the outcome that maximises the Greens' seats at the next general election, because it weakens Labour and the Greens' main competitors are Labour in those urban seats. But in terms of whether or not it's going to hand Nigel Farage the keys to Downing Street, we need Andy Burnham to win.
I suppose the Greens have it a couple of ways that it can go for them, right? On the one hand, let's say that Reform win this by-election by 1,000 votes and the Greens get 3,000 or 4,000. People are going to blame the Greens. Equally, if the Greens do quite well, but Reform really romp home, 4,000 or 5,000, like Hannah Spencer does in Gorton, the Greens can say, well, you were never really in the race to take on Reform anyway. I have to be honest, I don't see that happening with Andy Burnham. I think it's going to be a very tight race. Or, look, there's a campaign to run, isn't there? Burnham might romp home. We're going to talk about the Reform candidate, who, by the way, was also just announced today, formally. It probably will be close. I can't really see Reform winning it by a big margin. We'll talk about that a bit more later. I have to say, though, Michael, if you're Keir Starmer, it's a lose-lose, right? Because if Andy Burnham wins the by-election, we're going to see probably some kind of coronation, whether you like it or not, as Keir Starmer, for him to replace you. Equally, if Burnham loses, statistically, you're then thinking Labour are on for maybe double-digit MPs at the next general election. And I've said this before online, trying to look clever. This is the most important by-election in this country's history since 1922. The Newport by-election sealed the end of the Liberal Party. And I think a big defeat here for Labour seals the end for Labour. Not forever, but it's a seismic, historical moment for the party and their collapse. Frankly, it's huge. And I think alongside what we saw in Wales in the recent elections, it means that Labour effectively become a regional party of a few large cities. And even then, with the Greens, that might not be for much longer.
It's important also to say, just in case it's a perfectly legitimate opinion for anyone watching this, and I'm sure there are members of Novara Media who want the Labour Party to die and think that it's worth having Reform enter government because that will kill the Labour Party and then the Greens can emerge as the opposition. That's perfectly legitimate. I don't think that's a crazy thing to believe. It's just not my belief right now.
There's also another outcome that people want, which you're sort of implying isn't plausible, which is Reform are the biggest party, but they don't have a majority. But the Greens, with a progressive coalition, are a majority, and the Greens are the largest party. You don't think that's possible because you're saying that only two parties will vie for that 1 and 2 position. I don't think the Greens could be the largest party in the next general election. They could be the second largest party. That's plausible. I don't think it's likely, but you seem to be discarding that altogether.
I think a world in which the Greens have done well enough to get more seats than the Labour Party, the progressive vote is so split that Reform are just going to walk it. I mean, that's basically my view. If we had a proportional representation system, which I 100% back, that would be fine. But I don't think we're in a world where sort of people will tactically vote to the extent that everyone in the city votes Greens and then everyone who's in a Reform Labour marginal votes Labour instead of the Greens. Because we're in a polarised age, and the whole purpose of the Greens at the next general election, and Labour at the next general election, let's face it, is to polarise your voters. It's possible that if Andy Burnham is leader and there is some sort of outreach to the Greens, I would back this, of course, some sort of progressive alliance, then you could be in a relationship where the parties aren't telling you that the other one is evil. But it's quite likely that at the next general election, especially if Andy Burnham's not leader, if it's Keir Starmer or Wes Streeting or whatever, they're going to be telling you, vote Labour wherever you are. The Greens are going to be saying, vote Greens wherever you are. And I can't see the public having enough coordination to tactically vote to the extent that with a 50-50 split progressive vote, Reform don't get in.
this is very unlikely, highly improbable, but I can see a world where the Lib Dems and the Greens both get 100 plus seats. Don't think it's likely, but I'm saying if you look at the sort of sociological nature of the seats that those parties are looking at and where reform aren't really competitive, but I think you're right, it's not a majority. Now, the unpopularity of streeting Yvette Cooper and Shabana Mahmood amongst Labour Party members could be seen as indicating a pretty strong distaste for the Labour right. And Burnham is strongly associated, of course, with the party's soft left, which makes this report from the iPaper's Kitty Donaldson rather striking. Andy Burnham has promised, apparently, Josh Simons, who stepped down in Makerfield to allow Burnham to run for Parliament, the role of head of policy in number 10, a very senior job, if Burnham becomes the Prime Minister. Now, this story has been briefed to Donaldson by Labour sources, so they could be trying to discredit Burnham, that would make sense, who has refused to comment on the story altogether. Simons has also commented on the claim, saying this. This is gossip and tittle-tattle, despite being exhausted after a long and emotional week. I'm focused on one thing and one thing only, supporting Andy to win the by-election in Makerfield. That is all that matters for the Labour Party and the country. Now look, that's many things, but it's not a denial, is it? Josh Simons is, of course, the former head of Labour Together. That's the Labour right group that, under the earlier control of Morgan McSweeney, plotted the downfall of former Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn and orchestrated Keir Starmer's rise to the leadership. Some people say via hypocrisy, untruth, and lies. Simons was the group's leader between 2022 and 2024, when he himself was, of course, elected as MP for Makerfield, later going on to become a minister in Starmer's government. But in February, Simons resigned that post after it was revealed that he sent emails to GCHQ falsely linking journalists from The Times, as well as friend of the show and author of The Fraud, Paul Holden, to pro-Kremlin networks while in that role. I mean, that's extraordinary. That is one of the more extraordinary stories in British politics in recent years. I mean, grassing up journalists to spy agencies is not something you typically associate with any MP, at least of all a Labour one. Do you think there's something to this story, or is it planted by the Machiavellian, duplicitous masters of the dark arts like Peter Mandelson and Wes Streeting? Where's it going? Because Simons, to be fair, hasn't said this is all rubbish. He said it's tittle-tattle, it's gossip. That doesn't mean it's not true.
Well, Simons wouldn't say it's rubbish, right? I mean, it would be, he probably doesn't mind this story going out there. I suppose, obviously, first of all, let's say, I hope it's been planted, because this would be a very bad move by Andy Burnham. I mean, why would it have been planted? I suppose, if you're Wes Streeting or his faction and you want Andy Burnham to lose, you would say this makes Burnham look like someone who isn't an honest politician. He's doing backroom deals. He only got this seat because he offered a quid pro quo. This isn't someone with principles. This is someone who is just interested in himself. There might also be an idea that sort of the progressive wing of British politics is actually sort of seeming to be generally uniting around Andy Burnham at the moment, and this will throw a cat among the pigeons. So let's talk about who Josh Simons is, why this would be a problem, or why it might be plausible. I mean, one thing to say, he does seem like a smart guy. Did very well at Cambridge, then goes to Harvard to get a PhD, research assistant to Amartya Sen. So he has some sort of soft left credentials. However, this is why Burnham should go nowhere near the guy. He's clearly very factional, and factional for the wrong side. Started working in Corbyn's office in 2015, resigns after 6 months, becomes one of the loudest voices consistently attacking the Labour leadership over anti-Semitism, writes op-eds about it. Now, you might think that your opinion or someone's opinion might be that maybe he was genuinely outraged by this. I mean, from looking at this story as a whole, it seems like this was a stick to beat the Labour leadership with by members of the Labour right. That's where I tend to land. He then leads Labour Together, and where he starts these investigations into left-wing journalism, left-wing journalists like Paul Holden, but also, and this is where the judgment question comes in. Now, obviously, it's just as immoral to investigate our friend Paul Holden as it is a bunch of Sunday Times journalists. But it's more stupid for your own career to investigate Sunday Times journalists. So if you think that that's not going to damage your political career, if you're investigating the people from the paper of record who you really need to be on side, like it sounds to me like this is a guy who's maybe too clever for his own good, right? This is a man who has smarts but bad judgment. Also, I was looking up sort of who he said he was before this moment. Now he's saying he's sort of been turned to Andy Burnham and he thinks he's the guy. So in the New Statesman, he was sort of celebrating Starmer for his anti-populism. This was in 2024, sort of saying Corbyn and Farage, they were populisms of the left and the right. What we need is someone like Starmer who's the anti-populist. Now, how did that go? And what is Burnham pitching himself as? A sort of moderate, business-friendly social democrat, but clearly someone who wants to mobilize anger and disquiet in the population. He has to be successful, lean into left populism. And I would hazard that Josh Simon, is probably not the person to look to for that.
Well, Burnham is saying in his video, this is a by-election that marks the end of neoliberalism if I win, which you can agree or disagree with that, but that's precisely the opposite of what Keir Starmer would have been saying in 2024. And it's not just Simon's. There are lots of Labour MPs who I've seen share that video that Burnham posted in recent days, and they're opportunists. There's no other word for it. They're complete charlatans. These are people who were lock, stock, and barrel behind Keir Starmer. They'd bought into this technocratic kind of view of the man and the theory of change, really, that powered him to first the leadership and then being PM. And now they've just done a complete volte-face and say, actually, you know what? We need to end neoliberalism. And whatever your views on Andy Burnham and that project and Manchesterism, we're going to talk about that more later on tonight. Whatever your views on that, and I've got quite positive views on lots of that, actually. I think Andy Burnham probably has changed his views a little bit since 2015. I think he is a relatively authentic political communicator. I think he's done a decent job as mayor. I think some of the sort of policy agenda around Manchesterism is quite interesting. I think that's all true. But then what's his social base within the Labour Party? Who are the MPs? Who are the bureaucrats? What are the ideas that are being directed towards the party by the Labour movement? And it's all so weak, or actually, worse than weak, adverse, often malicious, often factional, often deeply detrimental to a successful political project in the long term, that whatever you think regarding Burnham's advantages, this stuff over here on the other side of the balance sheet is terrible. Let's talk about Reform UK. They've also announced their candidate for the Makerfield by-election today.
I was born in Makerfield. If I was elected, I'd be the first person born in the constituency to become the MP. I don't think any MP that's ever stood in Makerfield was actually born in the area. I'm a plumber, gas engineer. I've done that for a long time. I did my apprenticeship when I was 18. I love being a plumber. I do enjoy it. It's hard, but I do enjoy it because I do take pride in the work. I don't know, it gets me a bit emotional sometimes thinking that there's a chance that I could be representing people in Parliament because it's a massive honour, and people will be thinking, hang on a minute, he serviced my boiler last week.
Labour and probably the majority of the other parties have got career politicians, they go to private school, to university, they get a job at a think tank, or they're an assistant to an MP, and then before you know it, they're parachuting into somewhere they've never even visited to stand as an MP. Now, they might know the system, they might know how politics works, they might know Westminster, but they don't know the area or the people, You could read a book about something, but you'll never understand it until you actually do it.
Michael, I thought it was a great video. We don't know anything about this dude. Maybe loads of bad stuff will come out about him. We'll talk about that more in a moment. He might run a terrible campaign, but that as a video with the messaging, etc., the framing, I thought it was quite effective. However, he's talking about parachuting people into constituencies and machine politicians and advisors. But Burnham wasn't advised before becoming an MP. But it feels like it's more of an attack on Josh Simons than Andy Burnham.
Yeah.
Andy Burnham's 3 kids went to school in the constituency. He does have a relationship to it.
I mean, he's put out a video where he points to the school saying, I sent my kids there.
Yeah.
Like, he walks around. I think he was born in the neighbouring constituency, and he's been mayor of Greater Manchester, which includes that constituency. So the idea he's been parachuted in, I just don't think is really going to wash with anyone. I mean, we're going to talk about the potential flaws of this guy, which seems significant. I do think Reform are really in a bind because they've obviously decided that their strategy of sort of parachuting in a high-profile person, as they did with Matt Goodwin, didn't work very effectively. So they're looking for a sort of local, more grassroots candidate. Now, the one thing you can say sort of in defense of choosing a character like Matt Goodwin as your candidate is he's a known quantity, right? There are lots of reasons that one could take umbrage with Matt Goodwin. I mean, the Matt GPT stuff with his book, I mean, was very embarrassing for a politician, let alone a journalist. But people have been trawling through his social media for a very long time, right? He's a known quantity. If you go for a local person who hasn't had any media scrutiny, and there's someone who's joined Reform voluntarily, there is a high chance that once the scrutiny begins, the whole thing could unravel. And I think, I don't want to cast any aspersions. I know literally nothing about this guy, but I would guess, that if Reform take a strategy of going for untested grassroots strategies, there are going to be a lot of embarrassments ahead.
Yeah, I mean, people talk about Hannah Spencer. She was great. And there are a few comments saying they took it a bit literally.
They just,
didn't they?
yeah, let's choose a local plumber.
Let's get a plumber. But if you look at another by-election where they won, which was Runcorn, they won by, 6 votes in the end? But actually, and I covered that by-election, we made a video up there, I found Sarah Pochin a really weak candidate. She was a very weak candidate. You went to the hustings, local, hustings, and people can ask questions and there's debates between the various candidates. She was very weak, actually. And I felt like if they'd had a better candidate, they could have romped home there. The fact it was so close was partly because the candidate wasn't very good. And I do think this is a problem for Reform. And I think they played it safe with her, right? She'd previously been a Conservative. She's the sort of person who's, on the board of school governors, former town mayor, all this kind of stuff. And if you want somebody who's interesting, populist, credible, authentic, you run the risk, actually, there's some stuff you don't know that's in their bio, and pretty quickly it's going to end up on their Wikipedia page, and before you know it, they're a dud. It does feel like a high-risk strategy for them.
I mean, in a way...
But do they have an alternative,
well,
right?
if you want to be really sort of cynical about this, and almost a depressing thing to say is, we covered it on the show, I think it was probably last week, and where Richard Tice, is on the BBC, and he's refusing to even take a stand against a councillor who said he wants to melt down Nigerians and fill potholes with them, like the most outrageously, viciously racist thing one can imagine saying. The reason potentially they're taking such a hard line against not speaking out about this in public is because they realise their only chance of having enough people to stand as MPs at the next general election is if they completely normalise people who have said racist things in the past on social media. Because if they set a precedent whereby saying racist things on social media excludes you from being an MP or a councillor or whatever, they're just not going to have a big enough pool to draw from. And it's a very depressing thing to say, but I think that might be a judgment they've made.
Do you think they should have gone for somebody like Matt Goodwin then? A high-profile national figure?
I mean...
to go against Burnham?
I suppose the point I'm making is that there are real pros and cons to both sides. Maybe this guy's... His ex was
We're going to talk about his ex in a minute.
Let's get to that.
Let's get to that, Michael.
It's
like he's host. I learned from the best, ladies and gentlemen. Nigel Farage announced Kenyon's selection while hard launching a new nickname for Andy Burnham, posting this. Robert Kenyon is our by-election candidate. This is the plucky plumber taking on Open Borders Burnham. How does that even work? But Open Borders, it's like OBB, it's not even alliterative. He was saying at the end of that tweet that only Reform could win against Labour. Robert Kenyon was previously an Army reservist, has also worked as a technician in the NHS and now is, of course, a plumber. In 2024, he ran in the Makerfield parliamentary seat for Reform, coming second to Labour. Since then, he's been elected to Wigan Council, but there may be one or two red flags about to surface. Kenyon, whose middle name is Francis, is said to have posted on X under the handle Makerfield_RFK. That account has been suspended, something that appears to have occurred sometime after the 2024 riots that followed the murder of course, those 3 young girls in a stabbing spree carried out by Axel Rudakabana in Southport. Horrific events. I would never seek to make light of them, obviously, nor would anybody here at Novara Media. But he was suspended, okay? He didn't leave. He didn't delete his account. He was suspended on Elon Musk's Twitter. This isn't the old woke Twitter. This is the new 2.0 X, where you can say quite crazy things, actually, and nothing happens.
You have to be really, really racist to get suspended on this iteration of Twitter.
I mean, we're not going to make any assertions because we don't know why he was suspended, but generally speaking, it needs to be extreme violence or incitement. Just generally is important. So we'll see. Here at Novara Media, we can't quite see why that suspension took place, as I just said. Kenyon appears to have interacted with a number of far-right accounts, including Carl Benjamin and Peter of Europe. But none of that explains the suspension. These aren't hateful comments in themselves. Many Reform politicians and voters would entirely agree with them. They would endorse them. And it's not just us asking questions. The Conservative Party press office is curious too, and no doubt signalling to journalists they should probably start digging. Michael, what do you think is going to happen with this guy?
I mean, in a way, it might be the best thing that ever happened to him that his X account got suspended, because otherwise all those tweets, again, we can't sort of assume he's tweeted anything wrong. We don't know. We need to be clear that we don't know that he's tweeted anything wrong. But if your X account has been suspended, I think it's reasonable to assume that something problematic, to say the least, was tweeted. It's a bit like if, when Faiza Shaheen got suspended for her completely ridiculous, she hadn't done anything ridiculous. It was a ridiculous decision to suspend her for having liked a Jon Stewart post. And then sort of like a month afterwards, Elon Musk decided to make all the likes hidden. And everyone's like, if only he'd done that 3 months earlier. I feel like this could be, probably he was really annoyed when his X account got suspended, but it might be the thing that saves his political career. Because I don't think there is a way, if you didn't screenshot them before it got suspended, there's no way of sort of digging those up, is there? Or maybe can someone go into some sort of metadata and do it? I feel like it's just gone now.
Do you have if there are any sort of radical left activists in Makerfield who are screenshotting all this man's tweets in 2024, please reach out to either Michael or me on X. Our DMs are open. We will reply. Tickets are now available for our Downstream IRL event in June. We've got a really exciting guest for this one. It's Mariana Mazzucato, economist extraordinaire, very interesting woman. Her books are always so informative. I'll be speaking to Mariana at Earth Theatre in Hackney on the 22nd of June. I don't know if you've ever seen that graphic of the iPhone and what US public agency developed what part of the iPhone, the touchscreen, the lithium battery, HTTP protocol, etc. But basically, the iPhone, this avatar of capitalism, would be impossible without public investment and the state. She popularized that kind of argument very, very well. Superb speaker, superb writer. I'll be talking to her, and Ash Sarkar will be joined by John McDonnell. The tickets are available for that in the link in the description below. You can buy them there. I think it's on our website as well. Just put events, Novara Media. Something should turn up. Let me know, of course, what you think about these stories tonight as well. Use the super chat. We do try and read them out. I think we've had some people whinging. You're not reading out the super chats. We should read them out, and I will be told to read them out. Don't worry about that. And of course, if you like what we're doing here at Novara Media, go to novaramedia.com/support. Help us build a new media for different politics.
Very quickly, Aaron, someone pointed out in the comments that the Metro have access something where it saves apparently everyone's tweets before they're deleted. I don't know. We need to work out that technology, don't we? They've got some tweets from this guy. He says, "Let me be honest, Owen, there was never a threat from the far right because they don't really exist. Is it a hate," then to the Home Office, "is it a hate crime for Asian men to walk around in Birmingham assaulting white people en masse? I think now the king can open up his palaces and grounds for the asylum seekers." To be honest, none of this is, I find all this unpleasant.
Yeah, it's a fine line.
I don't think any of this is going to really scare Nigel Farage.
This is going to your median UKIP guys going, this guy's great.
Yeah, exactly.
He's our man. It's not, if it's not overtly racist or incitement, he's probably fine. That's where he might fall down. But I struggle to believe those kinds of comments would lead to him being suspended on Elon's Twitter.
No, I agree.
To be perfectly honest. Could be wrong. We'll, of course, stick with this story over the coming days and weeks, all the way through to that local election, by-election rather, in June the 8th?
18th.
18th.
I think.
I'm going up on the 8th. That's why I got confused. I've been making one of our videos up there. Very much looking forward to it. Andy Burnham has been confirmed as the Labour Party's candidate for the Makerfield by-election, you might have noticed. And since he announced his intention to stand in the seat last week, one word has accompanied his candidacy. And should he win, his premiership. No, it's not eyelashes. They are very long, aren't they? That word is Manchesterism. Now, you might associate that word historically with classical liberalism, Cobden, John Bright, free trade, the Manchester School of Economics. But now it seems to mean, well, we're not actually that sure. An essay in the New Statesman by Matt Lawrence, friend of the show, sought to explain the concept, making clear why it and PM Burnham adopting it would represent a potential break with the economic orthodoxy of the last 40 years. Earlier today, I spoke to Matt, and I started by asking him what the term Manchesterism even means.
Manchesterism is a response to a set of compounding crises that no one has been able to resolve. So an affordability crisis, economic stagnation, crisis of public finances. And there are many causes for that. So it might be austerity, it might be external shocks. Think of COVID, think of the Iran or the sort of Ukrainian wars. But actually, there's this underlying cause of why we can't get out of this trap, which is that essentials, so housing, energy, transport, care, these essentials that everyone uses are too expensive, too scarce, and too volatile. And a fundamental cause of that, not the only reason, but a fundamental cause of that, is the sustained retreat of public provision, public investment, and public control and ownership of those foundational sectors. And if we want to address that, we need to recognize that that transformation, privatization, and marketization of essential services has built an economy that extracts where it should invest, it fragments where it should coordinate, and it prices for profit when it should produce for need. And so Manchesterism is this idea of saying, actually, returning to public control, whether that's direct public ownership, public provision, the public as an actor in a market, is fundamental to getting control of the cost of those essentials, which is important not just for affordability and living standards, but also for Britain's fiscal position. And if we don't do that, we'll always be running up an uphill escalator, or downhill escalator as it may be, in which these upward pressures on prices of affordability, the lack of affordable housing is going to keep sort of compounding. And so Manchesterism, or the productive state, really is this framework of saying, to fix that, it's not enough just to rely on the welfare state. It's not enough just to liberalize the planning system. You actually need the state in different forms, whether it's sort of municipal, regional, whether it's sort of Westminster, to directly act in markets again, whether it's direct investment, whether it's direct shaping of markets. And that is how we address the affordability crisis over the long term. It's about addressing the supply side dysfunction so we can fix the foundations so that we can have a more dynamic middle of the economy and a really vibrant frontier in terms of innovation at the top.
So Andy Burnham's been quite clear in his tweets replying to people saying, look, I believe the state can do good things. I believe in public services, but that doesn't make me anti-business. And I think you've just touched on that there. Before we get to the roots of why it's been called Manchesterism, because I think you're outlining a really interesting social democratic response to these crises, which again, I think they're indisputable. But before we get to that, where would you stand on a wealth tax? Because you're talking about the essentials of life being too expensive. So housing, energy, transport, etc. That means greater state involvement, being a market maker. But does it also mean actually getting on top of the rentier class? Because of course, if you have something like a wealth tax, and that means they pour less of their money into, asset managers, which means that less of that money is then poured into buying privatized utilities, etc. Is there a tax element to it as well that really goes after the very rich?
So there is. I think this is about tackling that rentierism in the economy that extracts and doesn't, and it's about production. But I think we should recognize that a wealth tax, even the sort of more upper tier estimates, doesn't really raise sort of that much. And obviously its role might be sort of to discipline. But actually this is about saying, let's be about production. Let's produce affordable council housing at scale. Let's build clean public power at scale. Let's think about public transport networks to connect cities. And that goes back to your question of is this anti-business? No, it's quite the opposite. At the moment, we have an economy in which the foundations and the fundamentals are too scarce, too expensive, and too volatile. And that is not the foundation in which people can thrive, but nor is it a foundation in which businesses can build, because demand is stagnant and because supply is dysfunctional. Unless you get on top of that, you're always going to be trying to build an economy on weak foundations, and weak foundations are not the secure, stable base for forms of abundance that I think we should be aiming for.
Super fascinating. And I personally am very sympathetic to this argument of it being a progressive, but also pro-business sort of politics and framework. Some people might not like to hear that. They might say, well, screw business. I mean, you're welcome to think that. But I think empirically, it's very evident that the last 15 years haven't really worked for anybody but the very wealthiest in our society. So to go back to my point that I made a few minutes ago, I get it as a social democratic offer. It's a bit different to Starmerism. It's a bit different to basically what the Labour Party has offered in this country for a really long time, including in some ways Jeremy Corbyn. Why Manchesterism? Because there's no doubt Manchester has done very well in recent years, particularly under Mayor Andy Burnham. But some people would say, including some of my colleagues here at Novara Media, that's not because of anything he did, but because they were given greater powers by George Osborne of all people, because of effectively the city council, the greater region being a one-party state for 30, 40 years. They would say, Matt Lawrence, the reason why Manchester has done so well is because actually its politics look more like Singapore, enlightened autocracy. and Labour managerialism, the very thing that Burnham is now rallying against. What would you say to that?
So I think let's take that in broad sweep. So the vision is about a foundation which is secure and which are essentially sort of affordable, a dynamic middle in which sort of workers as well as sort of enterprise can actually be dynamic and be rewarded for their labor and rewarded for their efforts and sort of their work, and then a sort of advanced frontier. And Manchesterism, I think the example that speaks to that is the B network. Now, we shouldn't sort of overplay it, but nonetheless, it is a really instructive example. Not necessarily, it's not radical, it's just common sense that says rather than having a deregulated, outsourced, fragmented transport sector, we will coordinate these and bring it under public control, not even public ownership, but public control. And the benefits are very clear to see. Fares have fallen by 15%, ridership is up, new services are opening, and that is only really because of the return of public control rather than this fragmented, outsourced, privately controlled system. Now, of course, it's the success of Manchester. Success has many fathers, defeat has, as an orphan. But so of course, yes, it's partly about a financialized growth model. It's partly about the scaling in of capital into that growth model. And I think that brings lots of challenges. So the argument is not, well, let's choose, sort of that element to run with that. It's about saying, actually, you have to fix the fundamentals. It's about the expansion of public provision of those essentials. And if you don't fix those foundations, you will struggle to build a dynamic market economy, let alone a progressive left economy. And so that is really about why the Manchesterism argument is there. And frankly, it's also because Andy Burnham has said this. He has said this, for example, in his New Statesman article in September of last year, where he said very clearly, public control of essential services is both an affordability thing, it's how you bear down on costs that people are really struggling to get by with, but it's also a kind of fiscal prudence argument. It's saying if we don't get on top of those core costs, what you essentially see is more and more pressure on public spending to make up for the dysfunction of market scarcity and market underprovision.
On the specifics of how this might work, if Andy Burnham becomes the next Prime Minister, there's a lot of ifs, buts and maybes. He needs to win a by-election first. He would need to contest that leadership, potentially even against Keir Starmer. But if he got into number 10 Downing Street, he says, I agree with everything Matt Lawrence wrote in this superb article for the New Statesman. It has entirely identified the theory with which I wish to govern. That sounds great. But then I look at his potential head of policy, which is now being touted as Josh Simons, formerly with Labour Together. Are you worried that this agenda, which to me sounds like a sensible, soft left agenda with some radical elements to it, are you worried that because of the personnel in and around the Labour Party, in and around Andy Burnham, that it won't really go anywhere? That what they're doing with these ideas, many of which come from people like yourself, about public control, abundance, a supply side politics from the left, that actually this is just window dressing by these people so they can rebuild consent for a failing Labour Party and actually not deliver very much. Does that worry you?
Because I think in a way, divorce from personality, divorce even from Andy Burnham, this is about developing a coherent response to the problems that are driving our politics, which is unaffordability, it's a crisis in the housing market, it's a crisis in the basics, in the sense that things just don't really work anymore. And in a way, what we can kind of do on the wide left is to say, we are developing arguments that are coherent, persuasive, transformative, and answer the real material needs of people. And in doing so, can expand the real realm of freedom. This is about providing the basics affordably with security. And ultimately, sort of sending the essay, it's about thinking, how can we sort of change the relationship between market, citizen, and state, expand decommodification, challenge the empire of necessity to build real freedom. Now, that is a big political argument. Anyway, that is the political stakes rather than kind of personality-driven things. And clearly, if Andy Burnham became Prime Minister and wanted to pursue this agenda, fantastic. But I think in a way, the challenge for all of us is to build the demands. And I think that the thing I would say is a politics of public provision, and this is actually Mamdani Senior in a way, rather, and his son is putting it into practice in New York. But the politics of public provision is actually how you rebuild the sort of engines of solidarity that are constitutive of left politics and success. The market settlement for essentials fragments, it divides, it turns you against, what you can afford is your place in society, rather than as a political community we're going to provide. And therefore there's that civic universalism, and what binds us together is that we share these fundamentals. And therefore that paradox of redistribution in which actually the more you residualize things, the worse things get. actually a more expansive, progressive vision of public provision is how you show real benefits for ordinary people. It's how you tackle these sort of fiscal and macro pressures, which no doubt Britain faces. There are real constraints, real trade-offs. This has to be sequenced. But you can build a political economy that you can reconstitute a progressive base, regardless of political party, and actually answer some of these fundamental challenges that for the last 30 to 40 years, Britain has either ignored or has not had any answers to.
That was Matt Lawrence speaking to me earlier today. I thought his first answer was really clear about what it was. I've seen some jokes on X saying, what is Manchesterism? You know, is it the Hacienda and Oasis and craft beer? Obviously not according to Matt Lawrence anyway. Are you convinced about Manchesterism, Michael Walker?
I mean, I think the argument that Matt is making is coherent, and it's a sort of interesting program for government, which is to say we're going to focus on the supply side, and we can actually increase government involvement in the economy without it increasing overall borrowing or taxation, because what that will allow us to do is push down costs. At the moment, sort of the state has many obligations, you know, to house people who are vulnerable, but it doesn't have its own resources to fulfill those obligations. So the way to cut costs, whilst being, you know, humane, is not to say let's reduce the obligations that the state has, but let's sort of put ourselves in a better position to meet those without relying on rentiers. I think that's all smart. I do think that Manchester, and it's very similar to Andy Burnham, sort of, they're very easy objects for people to project their own desires and prejudices and ideas onto. So people can look at Andy Burnham and say, oh, he's this brilliant soft left figure, he's going to be beautiful. Or, you know, if you're Josh Simons, you can look at Andy Burnham and saying he's actually a sensible. I mean, he's put forward an image which is potentially attractive to the left, but ultimately, you know, he's a Blairite. You know, both of these things, you can look at Andy Burnham, you can look at Manchester, you can see what you want to see.
He's a cipher, is what you're saying.
He's a cipher, yeah. And Manchester is a cipher at the moment in this period of political debate. So let's look at sort of the Manchester model. I can't claim to be an expert. I'm going to try and speak to some experts over the next couple of weeks. But sort of from what I've been reading today, so Manchester's population fell from 750,000 in 1931 to 400,000 by 2001. So this was, we look at it now, this sort of image of success and vibrancy. It was another one of those cities that had massive post-industrial decline. It was called Gunchester. There were documentaries about Manchester being Gunchester in the early 2000s. Of course, also Manchester. So it's often actually the case that when a city is in decline, you get some of the most vibrant and interesting cultural artistic movements because, you know, if you haven't got much employment, people can do interesting things. You've got big empty buildings. People can have raves and all sorts of interesting things. So it wasn't all bad, but people were leaving. There weren't so many jobs, right? Then, this is a crazy fact, actually, before I go on. So this I had to double check because I thought it doesn't sound true, but it's from the BBC, which is, you know, our organisation of record. The resident population in Manchester city centre in 1990 was 500 people. I mean, you know, there was office blocks, presumably, and the like. It's now 100,000. So that's a crazy transformation, 500 to 100,000. Now, you know, maybe that was a BBC journalist sort of being a bit loose with it, but as far as I can tell, that's correct. So how did they do it? How did they regenerate this city in a way which has had downsides? It's probably harder to have a really vibrant music scene because I'm sure rents have gone up massively. That's what happens when a city grows. But also it's a place where more people want to live instead of leave. So as you said, you mentioned there sort of the idea that this technocracy that's been in power for a very long time. Richard Lees, probably more significant than Andy Burnham in terms of the current state of Manchester. That's because he was the council leader, the elected Labour council leader for 25 years, 1996 to 2021. That's a kind of continuity you're not going to see anywhere else in the country. And the chief exec, so that's the main sort of bureaucrat appointed by Richard Lees. He was chief exec of Manchester from 1998 to 2017. Now, these were people who, it seems, you know, they present themselves as not particularly ideological, very pragmatic. So you do have sort of some very important public infrastructure, the metro system, cheap, effective. That involves a lot of state infrastructure. You've got Burnham's B network, so that's obviously sort of public provision, even if it is under, to some degree, private control. But one of the big reasons that Manchester has, I suppose, more money now to play with, you need money if you want to do social provisions, is because they have built shed loads of buildings which has facilitated this massive rise in population. So the population has risen by 30% since 2000. And Richard Leese has been very sort of explicit that he has done this by inviting foreign direct investment and inviting developers to build for profit. So critics of Richard Leese have said, there was barely any affordable housing in any of these buildings. He said, if I demanded affordable housing, they wouldn't have built them. So it's better to have them built than to get no affordable housing. So that's very controversial among lots of people. But the story of Manchester seems to me to be not just business friendly, sort of very reliant on private capital to build as much as possible to facilitate a growth of population with jobs which would be developed, media city, finance, professional services, with some important public provision of public transport. So it's not... That's
not kind of Blairism, right? That's Blairism.
Yeah.
Financialization, development with regards to property, commerce, and then there'll be a few crumbs and we can give that to people with public infrastructure and welfare, etc.
Quite possibly, yeah. I suppose with Blairism, you would say the problem with that is that all this capital and people goes to Manchester, and what about everywhere else? You'd say Manchester was one of the winners of Blairism, and there are actually lots of losers of Blairism. So you could say it's not necessarily a vindication of Blairism, because if Manchester's a winner, somewhere else has to be a loser. But I certainly don't think you can look at the success of Manchester and say, oh, this is because they did municipal socialism. And I think building out a whole ideology from a bus network,
a very good bus network.
A very good bus network. It's the same model as London's bus network. We a big problem with Britain is that London has had much better provision than the rest of the country. So it's not to say, well, who cares? London's had this for ages. The big injustice in the country was that London had a brilliant public transport system and nowhere else did, because they'd been privatized and deregulated. And you had sort of 3 different brands of buses going down the same route, all charging slightly different fees. It was crazy having that not under public control. And absolutely, Burnham is right to sort of celebrate that and champion that. Whether or not that makes a vision for an entire political economy of a country, I'm slightly less convinced.
Michael Walker's main criticism of Manchesterism and Andy Burnham is that it should be called TFLism.
I'll get cancelled for that. Come on.
TFLism.
So, I don't know what they're talking about. London did this already.
But you're right that it's politically smart to focus your messaging around a northern city, mixed economy. You can be pro-business to some people, pro-state to others, future-oriented. It's good to be associated with success. Manchester has been a rare success story in this country over the last 15 years. I suppose there's 2 reads on it, right? One is it's kind of like Blairism, like we said, which is you're pro-business, you're pro-market, and there's some surplus, and that goes to some people. There's another read, which is, you're pro-business, you're pro-FDI, but actually it's about public control, right? And that was a word that Mathew used there. And core to Blairism was the idea that actually public control is always bad and that the market's always good with regards to provision of public services. Not always, but almost always. And even that, if that's now the centre of the Labour Party, if the Labour Party is not going to go any further right than that, that does feel like quite a big shift nonetheless.
Definitely celebrating it does. I think what Andy Burnham is offering, the pitch of Manchesterism, is different to New Labour.
100%, right?
He's saying that ownership matters, he's saying that control matters, which is different from New Labour. But looking at Manchester as an actually existing city, I think beyond the bus network, and again, I don't claim to be an expert, beyond the bus network, it doesn't strike me as a city where the state has an enormous amount of control over the provision of very much.
Fascinating. The article is excellent, and I'd recommend reading it. It's in the New Statesman. It does have a paywall, of course. I would say you should read lots of sources. Although I think you can read 2 or 3 articles a month on the New Statesman. Without having to pay for anything. Let me know what you think in the comments, the super chats, etc. I'm signed out. I can't see anything. We'll sort that out in a minute. Don't worry. That's all my fault. The HS2 high-speed rail service was intended to connect London with major cities in the north. An ambitious infrastructure project started in 2013 with a budget of £33 billion. It's progressively been cut back to a fraction of its original vision. In 2021, the branch connecting Leeds to the network was scrapped. That was followed by the binning off of the Manchester leg in 2023. That leaves a single track, yet to be built, running between London and Birmingham, with a connection to the existing West Coast main line in Staffordshire. But even that project has run into problems with multiple delays and spiralling costs. And today in Parliament, Transport Secretary Heidi Alexander announced even further problems on the line.
It gives me no pleasure to say the expected cost of completing HS2 is now between £87.7 billion and £102.7 billion priced in 2025. 2/3 of this increase is down to past misunderstanding of the work required, underestimation and inefficiency, issues within the control of HS2 Limited, some of its suppliers and previous governments. The remaining third is linked to inflation, which was not factored into previous cost estimates regularly enough.
£102 billion is, of course, 3 times the original budget for about half of the promised infrastructure. Although I should be saying, I need to be clear about this, that 33 billion, if it was in today's terms with inflation, it's about 48, 49 billion. Nonetheless, you're looking at 3 to twice as much for less. Given the line will now only be 135 miles long, that's a little under £1 billion per mile. HS1 was £50 million per mile. £1 billion per mile. And Heidi Alexander also made clear that trains won't be running anywhere near on time in terms of the schedules. The first service on the track won't run until 2039. Well, that will only be between Birmingham and the new Old Oak Common Station. I have no idea what that is either, which is still under construction in West London. Crazy. 100 billion to a station that nobody's ever been to. Trains won't run between Euston Station in central London and that other station until 2040, and the West Coast Main Line in Staffordshire until sometime between 2040 and 2043. In other words, this full line, which has already been reduced between Euston and Birmingham, will be in operation when I'm 60. When I'm 60, they started building it when I was 29. And even then, the high-speed trains won't be anywhere near as high speed as promised, dropping from an initial 244 miles per hour, as was envisaged 14 years ago, to 199 miles per hour. Now, Alexander was clear about who she thought was responsible.
And so this Labour government is clear. We will deliver HS2 to completion because this country can build big things. We just need competent people at the helm to deliver them. Prime Ministers Cameron, May, Johnson, Truss and Sunak created the world's...
I'm sure the Secretary of State did not mean to use the Right Honourable Member for Richmond and Northallerton's name. Heidi Alexander.
My apologies, Madam Deputy Speaker. Previous Prime Ministers, in my view, created the world's most expensive slow-motion car crash, and they barely batted an eyelid. Under this government, we've rolled up our sleeves and done the hard yards, putting the right team in place and being honest about the scale of the challenge. Madam Deputy Speaker, I understand that this statement today will be met with cynicism and anger. But I say with genuine pride and conviction that I believe we are finally starting to see real delivery.
So much for High Speed 2. We got Slow Speed 1. HS2 was always conceived as a very ambitious plan at the cutting edge of rail technology. This was an ad for the line released by the Department of Transport in 2013. That, of course, was under the coalition government.
The High Speed 2 network will transform rail travel in Great Britain. It's the backbone to a new high-speed Britain, connecting the north and the south, linking 18 cities and cutting many existing journey times by almost half. With up to 36 high-speed trains running on the network every hour, it'll put 2/3 of the population of northern England within 2 hours of central London. Leeds will only be an hour and 22 minutes from London, 50 minutes quicker than the current journey time.
None of that has come to pass, with critics saying the whole plan was too ambitious. Critics have frequently accused the plans of excessive gold plating, with the project aiming to run the fastest trains in the world when they were, of course, first conceived in the early 2010s. With a reduced top speed of 199 miles per hour now announced, we're looking at train speeds other countries have been hitting broadly since the 1970s. Japan's Shinkansen trains, also known as bullet trains, were reaching nearly 200 miles per hour in the late 70s. That's where we are now with a project that won't arrive till I'm about 60 years old. This is not cutting-edge technology, with some now topping 310 miles per hour. Meanwhile, in France, with the TGV, this huge, vast network that runs across the country, those speeds have been exceeded since 2007. And this is not cutting-edge technology. And of course, there's China, Michael's favorite place, which now has over 31,000 miles of high-speed rail. Many of the trains on it reaching speeds of over 200 miles per hour since 2005. And this is a middle-income country, certainly back then. There's another element to that impressive transformation in China as well. Just 40 years ago, the average speeds reached on China's commercial lines was just 40 miles per hour. Isn't that crazy? 40 miles per hour. I was alive. Michael, how the tables have turned.
I know, absolutely. I mean, it's very depressing. So before 2008, China had no high-speed rail. They've now got 40,000 kilometers. So it's more than double the high-speed rail network everywhere else in the world, right? So China is exceptional. You can say, why are we comparing ourselves to literally the best country in the world at building high-speed rail? But we have built zero in that time. We announced this project in 2009, right? They didn't start building either until 2008. They've built 40,000 kilometers. They've connected every city in China with more than 500,000 residents in that time. It's brilliant. It's relatively cheap. It works really, really well. Why? Now, I mean, this sort of goes back to your interview with Dan Wang. Excellent. Sort of says China is a country of engineers. The politicians there usually studied engineering, very well qualified in engineering. All of our politicians did law. I mean, he was talking about the United States, but we pretty much have the same political
Best case
system
law,
when it comes
right?
to,
I mean, it's often journalism, right? Best case.
I mean, even more now, journalism. So that makes a big difference. Obviously, you don't have to go all the way to the Chinese system. I mean, because that's very different to our own. The French, the Spanish, the Italians, also much better at building high-speed rail than we are. I do think this has a lot to do with, I suppose, there is an argument that it's about sort of common law, where we have a very rights-based system, constant consultations. Everyone can complain about it going through their land or getting in the way of a bat colony that they care about. There are so many veto points when it comes to building anything. The other issue, I think, is that there is no sort of inbuilt institutional memory and state capacity when it comes to this. So what you ideally want is you want a state department full of engineers who understand how to build high-speed rail, who get it, who are experts in this, and they can sort of decide. I don't think there are any states that sort of actually build the track themselves. I don't think it's normally public employees building the tracks. But what you want is someone who is signing these contracts with the people to build it, who understand what they're talking about. So then if you're trying to highball, you can say, no, I think it should actually cost this much. I'm not actually sure we need that particular feature that obviously you want to sell to me because you want to sell me the highest feature. So we need less veto points and more inbuilt expertise in the government. I think the Americans and us have a similar problem there, which the French have been quite good at doing. They have it as sort of part of their political national identity that you have to be able to build state projects. That's part of the legitimacy of the state. And it's very much, a prestigious thing to do, to go and work for the French planning department. And we need to bring that back. That's why I feel like, one response obviously to the HS2 going over budget is to say, let's cancel it. Let's not bother with any of this. I think do it and make sure the next leg is much cheaper than the last one. I mean, obviously the most embarrassing thing about this is not the price. It's the price combined with it only going from London to Manchester and it taking 20 years. Like that is 30 years actually. Not to Manchester, to Birmingham. It's not even going to Manchester. It's not going to Manchester. It's not going to Leeds. London to Birmingham is taking 40 years and it's costing £100 billion. That is an outrage.
£1 billion a mile is kind of crazy. I'm exactly the same as you. Build the thing, learn the lessons. Next time you might save a bit more, and then hopefully we have, lots of high-speed rail, HS2, 3, 4, 5. And by the time you get to 5, you have a very cost-effective, efficient publicly administered system, right? Very effective procurement. I think that's where we should go. But £1 billion per mile. And I think the strange thing with all this, Michael, I agree with what you just said, right? But it's really easy to say the leadership was poor. We don't have a culture of engineering. It was politically mismanaged. All these things that have come out of this report today, which Heidi Alexander has responded to. The crazy thing for me is we did a similar project, HS1, which connects, London to the Eurotunnel. It's half the length. That's not a small bit of land. It's about half the length of the Birmingham-London line. I think it's about 65, 66 miles. About half the length of the bit we're now doing. They did that in around 9 or 10 years. It worked out about £50 million per mile, right? Which is a lot less than £1 billion a mile. So it was a lot quicker, had far fewer problems, had some problems, of course. It was a lot quicker, far fewer problems, and a lot cheaper. And you would think, okay, that sets you up so nicely. Okay, well, we did that. Let's do a similar project, twice as big, be a bit more ambitious, take those lessons we've learned forward. But actually, we were terrible. It's like you build a house the first time. You do an okay job, but it's pretty crap. The plastering isn't great, and the electrics aren't good, and the plumbing's not great. But it's you can live in it. And then you try and build something else, and it's terrible, and it collapses the minute you finished. What explains that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, because obviously there are all these sort of political economy, sort of structural reasons why you can say sort of our legal system, the fact that sort of
we had that legal system for HS1.
That's what I mean.
Right?
That's why this is confusing. Why could we do it then? I mean, I have read people say one thing we haven't done is just learn from doing it before. So obviously the reason it's very cheap in China and France is because they do it over and over again. You learn from your mistakes from the first one. You do what worked. You can then also sort of, you don't have to get something bespoke built every time because you're using the same track, you're using the same rolling stock. You get economies of scale. I don't know why we didn't do that. Potentially, again, for each of these projects, we create a new publicly owned corporation, which is separate from the civil service. And one reason is because that's supposed to give it sort of a more long-term framing because it's not changing government to government. It's also so that you can hire people from it without looking at the pay structure of the civil service. So if this was a government department, you wouldn't be able to pay people enough that sort of the top engineers want to come and work for it. So there is potentially sort of a stupid kind of system we have where everything is too formal, what you're paying people in the civil service. So if you want to actually do something that's competitive on the global market, you have to make a separate public corporation. But that means you don't have any of the institutional memory which you would get if you brought it in-house.
But also you don't get the value for money, right? You're saying, this is the thing. We have to pay the top wages to get the best people, and the best paid civil servant in the UK over the last 15 years has always been the person that's basically leading HS2. Now, I'm not going to blame these faults on the present person at the top of HS2 because they weren't caused by them, but their predecessors were paid huge amounts of money, and frankly, they delivered shit outcomes. I don't like to use that word, but it's true. £1 billion. So they said that you have to pay money to get the best. We should be like Singapore, pay our politicians £250,000 a year. I mean, you can make that argument, and it might be a good argument. I don't agree with it personally. But if you look at HS2 and its history over the last 13 years, it doesn't really stand up.
Ideally, you want the best people to work in the civil service and work there forever. So I think the problem here is
you want the best people are mission-oriented to get the best value for money, right? That's the thing. You don't want the best people just because, well, actually the best people will have the stupidest plan and they won't be worried about costs.
But you need, I suppose the issue is, if you want like amazing engineers and scientists, you are competing with some people who can pay them pretty well, right? Especially engineers, right? So I suppose an issue is the civil service is just full of like humanities and law graduates.
This is Michael's bugbear.
You need way more people in there who have done hard sciences. And probably that does make it, people who do hard sciences probably should get paid a bit more than people who waffle on about politics.
No, we don't want no Novara Media presenters working on building HS3. Thank you very much.
No, absolutely not.
Thank you very much. Although, again, it's another strange part of this whole story. I think there were 5 or 6 comms firms, strategic communications, public affairs, doing the whole comms messaging for HS2. Most people have no idea why we're even building this thing. Why would you have 4 or 5 comms agencies? You'd have one because you want one message, right? It really was a gravy train. And we shouldn't be concerned about admitting as much, even if we think the state should be building high-speed rail. Michael, I'm a bit sad tonight. Do you want to know why?
Go on.
We've not argued.
I know. We're too agreeable at the moment. We're on tomorrow, aren't we?
We are.
We're on tomorrow. We'll find something to row about. I just want to do a little shout out for United Dreamer. I worked on HS1. We have an engineer in the audience. They dropped the HS1 partners for HS2, so it was completely different partners. I would like to know why they did that, but that'll be for another day.
Well, what's their name, this person?
They are called United Dreamer.
United Dreamer, Aaron at novaramedia.com, Michael at novaramedia.com. A classic example of this is HS1 had 199 mile per hour, I think, basically where we're ending up now with top speeds. Who made the decision that actually we needed something quicker for HS2? And maybe we do. We've talked about that. But who made that decision? What was the decision-making process like? I'd love to know. This is a case study in political dysfunction.
One more engineer.
Go on.
B. Watton says, I'm a software engineer and have wanted to work for the government for a very long time, but I can't justify the massive pay cut.
Don't worry. It's a matter of time before PM Michael Walker walks through the doors of 10 Downing Street and he'll bring a pro-STEM agenda. He'll alienate all the humanities leftists.
I'll be the only humanities graduate in the civil service. Everyone else can go.
Yeah.
Just me and a bunch of engineers.
Yeah. We'll lose all our supporters. But before we do, of course, lose all of you, become a supporter first. To leave, to get upset with Michael Walker and cancel your subscription, you have to start one first, right? So go to novaramedia.com/support. Help us build a new media for different politics to build consent for things like high-speed rail. I want to do that. Ideally at £50 million per mile, not a billion. That would be good. But it's the kind of thing that really matters to me, matters to lots of people out there. You might not support HS1 or 2, but I think most people think we should be having fewer journeys in cars, more by rail and public transport generally. Michael, you've been fabulous tonight.
You've been fabulous too. It's been an enjoyable hour and 15 minutes.
Yeah. Bournemouth playing tonight. Touchwood, come on Cherries. Beat Man City, get in the Champions League.
I need Tottenham to lose because I'm going to West Ham versus Leeds with my dad on Sunday. And if Tottenham get a point, then it's going to be a pointless game because West Ham will already have been relegated. And if Tottenham lose, it will at least be exciting.
West Ham Leeds. In the 70s, that would have been pure violence.
Now it's going to be a very civilised affair in the Olympic Stadium.
Now it's latte macchiatos and Michael Walker with his matcha donut. Thanks to all of you watching tonight. You've been fabulous. See you tomorrow at 6 p.m. for another episode of Novara Live. Good night.